All right, we are live. Welcome to the Rabid Atheist. I'm Rabyd, your host, former pastor turned atheist, now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. As promised, we will have a live stream on Saturday if I meet a financial goal during the week. Today, I do also have a goal up, but that's mostly for for having to deal with Christendom again when it comes to slavery. It's the same narrative in this video, but I don't want to spoil too much of it. But it's a comic. I feel every once in a while I have to come back to this conversation because there's always some Christian that wants to tell me that the morality of the Bible was better, and I just don't buy it. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing a little bit later here in the show. But I want to give a shout out to everybody here. Okay, Fred. All right. And there's Rimmer is here. Let's see. Martin's here. Glad to have you here, Martin. Always glad to have one of my mods here. Fred's here too. So thank you for you two guys. Let's see. Oh, John's here as well. I saw you guys were talking about Bridge the Divides debate last night with a Christian. Yeah, I missed that one. So, hey, Paul, good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you back. I'm assuming there's a story behind that, but we'll get to it. Just so everybody knows, yesterday I was fighting a cold off, and so I'm still kind of in the after effects, but I do feel much better today than I did yesterday. And I guess all my grandkids have it too, and my daughter and everything. So we didn't even meet for breakfast yesterday because the entire plague is on the entire family. So so if I cough a little bit and have to blow my nose or whatever, I apologize ahead of time. So, here we go. I Killed Earl is here. Good to see you. Skeptically Pissed is here. All right, everybody, the usual suspects plus Paul. Good to see Paul again, though. I miss Paul. I miss a lot of people when they're not around. I wonder where they go. I always obsess about that, being autistic, I think. I'm always obsessed about why people don't show up. So, yes, kids are walking petri dishes, and I think we all had it last week Friday, and it just took a little bit longer to hit me because I'm ridiculously healthy with a high constitution. So, Kristen's here. Yeah, some people have lives. Yeah, I don't. I don't have a life, so that's why I'm a YouTuber. Yeah, so there's that. All right. But today's video is brought to us by What Would You Say? I did them last week with their advice on dating. I'm finding this channel very fascinating because it's like a walking Christian trope, the entire channel of how to justify certain things in the Bible. And today we're going to be looking at their video that justifies slavery. They have another video which deals with Black History Month. And I was going to do that one, except the commentator is an African American and a Black person, and the comments are disabled on that video. I wonder why. So it's oh yes, that's right. That's right. You are like midnight right now and could end up being up till 2 in the morning to see my streams. I do apologize for that, but so there's that. But and then Pinworm, welcome Pinworm. So, but I decided to look these guys up. They are actually, and in the corner of the video, you'll see Colston something. Colton Center for Christian Worldview. Yeah, their title channel, What Would You Say, is kind of how to answer people's objections to Christianity, basically. And so, um, so that's kind of where these guys are coming from. So, yeah, now that I know their origin, it's more of a they are definitely about equipping Christians with answers so they can live effectively. And this channel is still active. So in fact, their latest video is on deconversion, which I will most definitely react to at some time in the future. So they're an active channel, so we'll see what they have to offer. But this video is from a little while ago. But I'm going to pull it up. I have to leave the volume off because for some reason StreamYard likes to auto start shit. And it's probably the one feature I do not like about them is like they should have the ability to turn that off so it doesn't auto start. But hold on, I'm going to need to get my ears on so I can actually hear the video myself. All right, make sure. All right, we are connected. All right. Okay, so now we're ready. Let's get this started, and we'll see what he has to say about slavery. The only slavery that's justified is slave. I remember her saying that. I do. All right, let's see what the Colston Center for Christian Worldview has to say about biblical slavery.
You're in a conversation and someone says, the Bible endorses slavery. If it's wrong about slavery, it's probably wrong about other things too. What would you say? It's true that the Bible...
Okay, I'm gonna stop right there. What would I say? I think I'm gonna hold that question open till the end of the video because I do have a presentation of some of the things that he leaves out of this presentation. Because yes, I'm. Are you scared? I'm scared too. These people are amazing, but yeah. All right, you are far away, but I'm glad when you show up, Paul. Thanks, I appreciate that. But okay, so the posed question is, what would you say if somebody says that the Bible endorses slavery, and how would you respond to that? And of course, he's going to give us some responses to this that are probably pretty typically Christian. So, oh yeah, that's right. Martin's also, yeah, it's 1 a.m. in Moscow. Yeah, it might be right. I think so. Yeah, it's my, I do have Russian fans, so I find that very interesting. I do have Russian people that like my show, so I find that very interesting. So I don't just remember the band, I remember the movie from which the band was based on. So, all right.
It's true that the Bible, in both the Old and New Testament, talks about slavery. But does this mean that the slave trade that's such a shameful part of our history is actually something the Bible supports? No. And here are 4 reasons why.
Okay. Just so you're warned, there are, oh yeah, they're able to watch. The whole Russian-Ukraine thing has everybody on edge in the United States because we seem to be changing our view of the whole situation. So yeah, it's midnight in Germany. Yep. So, but yeah. But so he's going to make this, he's going to make this, the slavery in the Bible isn't the same as what we think about argument. And yet at the same time, he wants us to think about slavery in the Bible in modern terms, which is also not accurate for him to do either. So there's that. So, but he's going to give us 4 reasons why the Bible does not endorse slavery. Let's see. So let's see what happens.
First, the slavery talked about in the Bible was more like servitude. When we hear the word slavery, we usually think of slave ships carrying Africans away from their home to be bought and sold as the property of white people in other parts of the world. But the Hebrew word, sometimes translated as slavery in the Bible, refers to something very different. Now, before the development of modern economy...
Okay, I have to deal with that as somebody who knows the biblical word and stuff. It's not that different. And any Hebrew scholar that's worth their salt, that's being honest, will tell you that that word for slave absolutely means slave. Okay, like it's a modern apologetics concoction to change the meaning of that word. Okay, they are looking for they're looking for a way to get out from under this whole concept of slave, but it is absolutely translated as slave for a reason. So he lies. No kidding. Yeah, I told you that he's going to lie. Already, this is not starting out well because I know my history too well, and I know the Hebrew text a little bit enough to know that when they see that, here's the point that I want to make. Okay, it's the same word when it describes the Israelites as slaves under Egypt in the Exodus story. It suddenly means slave under hard bondage in that context, but then we get to the context of the law, suddenly magically it changes its meaning. It's the same word. Okay. And this is the thing, it's like it's property, it's slavery, plain and simple. But John makes the best point because it's the same word that describes the Israelites when they're in Egypt. And so it's talking out of both sides of your mouth to say, listen, okay, I want the word to mean this over here because it's convenient. And then I want it to mean something else over here because it's convenient. So, yeah. Yeah. Well, yes, it can be. But when you consider the fact that what these apologists do is they pick the meaning of the word that is most convenient to their argument. Okay. And so, yeah, you made 3 points with a simple statement, Egypt. Yes, you did. It's a valid point because they want it to be slave under hard bondage and all that crap when it's the Israelites in Egypt. But when the same word is used in the context of the law, suddenly it means something different. So there's that. All right, let's move on because he's going to make a point about modern economies, which
different. Now, before the development of modern economies that led to the kind of wealth we see today and governments capable of offering large welfare systems, cultures developed ways to deal with the problem of poverty.
Which kind of begs the question about God. Why doesn't God create those economic systems ahead of time so slavery doesn't have to exist? Why doesn't God endorse a government that actually leads to people having better lives? Yes, the ancient world came up with ways of dealing with poverty and stuff and dealing with these things, and I won't deny that. And slavery was sometimes used as one of those means. That's not just Hebrew culture. That's all cultures have used slavery as a way of dealing with certain social issues. But that doesn't mean that it's right. And it doesn't mean that they couldn't have had something better. I mean, you have the supposedly all-knowing God giving the revelation of the Bible. Why doesn't he reveal economic and governmental systems that will lead to prosperity of all, so slavery is unnecessary? Why don't we get to that point? God is pro milk and honey. Yeah, I suppose that's true. Yeah, maybe because he doesn't exist. Yeah, that might be a good plan. I've thought of that too. But that's kind of one of my arguments at this point. If you're going to make this argument that we now have social economic systems that are better where slavery isn't necessary, so to speak, if you're going to make that argument, which I still think is a shit argument, then you leave yourself open for the criticism of your God, where you can say, hey, How about we have God reveal those systems ahead of time so that people are benefited? I mean, there's a lot of things that aren't in the Bible. So it, yeah, I that if God did something better, it would have actually showed that the God Bible was inspired. Like, how about a germ theory of disease in the pages of the Torah? The reason you wash your hands is there's these invisible things called germs that if you get them, they can make you sick. So here's some sanitation and cleanliness rituals and some science to look up and start doing. It's like, yeah, and that's another issue. We still do this. Okay, it's the problem with the biblical view of slavery is it still justifies slavery today. And I think I reacted to a pastor who was at least honest about it and saying, yes, slavery could still be used today as a way to deal with problems. Yes, Josh Bowen pretty much put the issue of the name thing to rest. He's really good at that. He knows the Hebrew better than I do. So he really kind of nailed that one pretty hard, as I recall. So, yeah, but it's not it. The idea this writer is trying to present is it's different. This video is such the typical trope how to deal with slavery in the Bible that I almost didn't use it, but it's a good way to review it. And it's an interesting topic. And so far I haven't seen any theists in the room, so maybe they're shying away today. So, whereas people are paid now not to avail. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, you could argue, I mean, slavery obviously still exists in the world in various places. It hasn't been eradicated from planet Earth. But the apologists, yeah, sorry, my voice is shot to shit, so I'm probably saying things wrong today too. So, but yeah, he does that. He does that very well. But yeah, an argument could be made that today we still have similar problems, but the idea that the ancients used slavery as this was just a way of dealing with social issues, that's a load of shit. Okay, there were people in power who wanted things done, and so they created the institution of slavery to enslave other human beings to do the work for them so they didn't have to. That's very, very much a part of what slavery is about in the ancient world. So the notion that this was just a way of dealing with certain social ills, yeah, I'm just not seeing it. But let's continue.
And because in Old Testament times there was no such thing as a government assistance program, people would often sell themselves in order to have the basic necessities of food and shelter.
And that's a really shitty way to do it. Just going to interrupt there.
Slavery, in this sense, was a type of social safety net. Slavery.
If you're having to have slavery as your social safety net, you need a different social safety net. Once again, let's just deal with it.
Was also a way to deal with bankruptcy. Those who could not repay a debt would sell themselves to repay it. But this kind of slavery was usually not for life, unless one voluntarily did so. In the Jewish law, servitude would last 6 years. The slaves would be freed in the 7th year, and every 50 years, in what was called the Year of Jubilee, all debts were wiped out. It is undoubtedly true that some slaves were treated terribly.
Okay, I want to stop there because he's pulling that. Does anybody know the chapter? I know the chapter, what it is, but what else is in Leviticus 25 where the Year of Jubilee and the Sabbath year are there? Does anybody else remember that there's another verse of scripture, about 3 verses of scripture, that he's kind of leaving out at that point? I don't know that the Year of Jubilee was never in the same book by the same author who also justifies and tells slaves to be obedient to their masters as if to Christ. The same guy who calls himself a bond slave of Christ. So slavery is a necessary theological concept. for Christians to have in order to understand some of their theology. Yeah, it's one of the great contradictions of the Apostle Paul. So he'll sit there and say crap like that in Galatians and then turn right around and tell slaves to be obedient to their masters. So obviously he's talking about two different things. One is the supposed freedom in Christ, and the other one is societal, which doesn't change. Yes, yeah, social safety net. Yeah, what does that even mean? I've read Galatians 1 several times. I preached from Galatians 5 so many times I lost count. Okay, but I've read it, and you need to read other verses, which I will get to later. Earl will tell you, I've read it. Okay, and I also know that there are many, many other verses that contradict Galatians 5:1. So there's that. So being a slave is honoring God. How is that equal? How's that you're still under the yoke of real slavery, but somehow you're spiritually freed? What kind of nonsense is that? God absolutely makes it okay to be a slave. And the New Testament writers all say that there's a pretty much good consensus from Paul's writings and pseudo Paul that slaves are to be obedient to their masters. How is that not a condoning of slavery if you are openly saying slaves be obedient to masters as if to Christ and God? You're cherry picking. So, yes, I do. I know he does. The Old Testament is very clear that the Jews were allowed to take chattel slavery. I was just getting to this guy. He pulls out the year of Jubilee, and he pulls out the Sabbath year. But in the same chapter, in verses 44 through 46, says, but there is a caveat, folks. Don't worry. You can still keep the slaves that you get from surrounding territories, and they can be passed on as property to your children and your children's children. So what he leaves out at this point in the video presentation, you're just not reading the whole thing. No, I'm not. I'm not taking out of context. You just wish I was. Okay. But no, he's very, don't worry, folks. You can keep those slaves forever. They're property. He openly says they're property. Okay. And so what our good friend here in this video is doing, and what the guy is doing in chat, is not wanting to read the rest of the story. They want to keep their cherry-picked verses and their cherry-picked ideas. The fact is, even if I take the Old Testament law as what it says, the only people who really benefited from the Sabbath year and the year of Jubilee would have been Jewish men, okay? Because Jewish females could still be sold into slavery by their fathers or their brothers if their father was dead, once they reach the age to pay off debts. So it's very much there, okay, that the idea of chattel slavery of nations around them was very much present in the Old Testament. And the New Testament, it doesn't get any better, because while Paul does say there's neither Jew nor Greek and none of that, neither slave nor bond nor free, notice he says there's neither free. So he's saying that all those concepts don't mean anything when it comes to acceptance of salvation. He's trying to make the case that anybody can accept salvation, not just the Jews. But he later on maintains societal status quo when it comes to slavery. So yeah, this is the other problem. And he doesn't mention it either. When you look at the average lifespan of an ancient, which is 30 to 40 years, and the reason that's down is because of a lot of infant mortality, but he's leaving out the fact that every 50 years means it might happen once a lifetime. And you could be born at a time and die at a time where you never experienced the year of Jubilee. Okay. So it's like, if you're giving rules for slaves, if you're telling people to emulate slaves as far as your obedience to God, which Paul does when he says he's a bondslave of Jesus Christ. You also have Jesus, who tells several stories where slaves who are doing all the work and want a bigger cut, they get attacked and are called wicked. You have slaves that are given talents, and then told to do whatever. It's like, yeah, I don't get the notion of why you have to leave that stuff out unless you're trying to misrepresent what the Bible says about slavery, which this video, having watched it, yes, that's what they're doing. This is a propaganda piece. Okay. I'm going to label it for what it is. And it's propaganda, what a lot of Christians believe about slavery in the Old Testament. There's a lot of modern understandings of, put in here. It's funny how he doesn't want you to look at Old Testament slavery like we look at it here in the United States in the 1800s, right before the Civil War, for instance. But he'll turn around and put modern concepts of boss and employee or employee things on it and think that that's okay. So, yeah, welcome, Ann. They call it indentured servitude, but that's only true for Jewish men. I mean, for you ladies in the room, you need to understand if you were the daughter of a guy who got in debt, that man could sell you into slavery, your father, to pay off his debts. And then you were a slave to that master. Well, that master had sexual rights to you. And if you used those sexual rights, then you became his concubine. Okay. Well, that's not indentured servitude anymore. You're now his wife by force. Okay. So it's like these rules really only apply to Jewish men. If you were outside the Jewish faith, if you weren't of the tribe of Israel, then you were chattel slavery. And the idea that the Bible doesn't endorse that, it's right there in Leviticus 25. The very chapter he's using for Sabbath year and year of Jubilee go down. The exception clause is the slaves you've taken from the nations around you, their property. Okay, so there's that. Yes, the sex slaves. Yes. Indentured hubby. No indentured hubbies, only indentured wives. So there's that. Oh man, but yeah, this is going to get hard to watch. I'm warning you all ahead of time. Hey, so how you doing, man?
Terribly. But that's not because the Bible encouraged it or even permitted it. Though many nations at that time would take slaves after war, Israel was not permitted to do so.
Okay, that right there is a bold-faced lie. And I only have to call up Numbers 31, okay, to do so. In Numbers 31, there is a passage where they're talking about dividing up the spoils of war, and listed alongside of cattle, donkeys, oxen is people, the word for people. So the idea that slaves weren't taken after war, that's a load of shit. Also in the same Numbers 31, it says that when Moses is confronted with the fact that the people they've just conquered, you took the women. Why did you take the women? Okay. You need to go back and kill every woman that's had relationship with a man. You need to kill all the children too. And the only people that are going to survive this are young girls who haven't had sex yet. Those you can keep for yourselves. And I often hear Christians apologize. Well, that's not sex slavery. How is it not? Because you're basically saying, why the importance of the fact that they're virgins? Okay, why is that important? Okay, if it's not about sexuality. So, yeah, he's really banking on people. This is definitely one of those cases where he's definitely, yes, they were commanded to take slaves. Okay. And he's lying right here so bad. Okay. I mean, and in the video, like the comment section lit up at this point. It's like, dude, have you even read Numbers 31? Have you, it's like this guy is like literally lying, okay, about it. They were absolutely commanded to take slaves and divide them as spoils of war. And so he's just straight up lying here. Okay. That just did not happen. Yes, they don't really cross-reference stuff very well. The one thing I've learned about Christian theology and Christian social views is that they love to cherry pick their Bible and ignore. I think most Christians, the reason they stay in the faith is they don't honestly and objectively deal with passages like Numbers 31. They don't like to think about it. They block it out of their mind, and they're indoctrinated to do so. So, but yeah, it's just, this is a straight bold-faced lie. That's just not true. He also dealt with treatments of slaves, and he, you know what, he's going to talk about that. So I'll wait for that one when we get there. So let's keep going.
This leads to the second point. Slaves were to be treated as people, not property.
Too bad for the nations around Israel, which are directly told that they are property and they can't be freed during the years of Jubilee and Sabbath years, where it openly says that they are your property and you can transfer them to your children. Another direct contradiction of the scripture. So, yes, women were treated as property as well. That's the problem, because it's why I say it only really applies to Israelite men, because Israelite women are kind of a class of slavery of their own. Okay. They have a little bit more rights than the chattel ones, but not much. So, yeah, but it's the children too. The children of a master-slave relationship belong to the master. So in the Bible, that's pretty clear. I haven't watched the movie yet, so I'll have to, but yeah. Yeah, it is gross. And he doesn't really deal with that aspect. Like, he doesn't even talk about the fact, like, the year of Jubilee and the year of Sabbath, it doesn't seem based on the other laws, that if a woman was sold by like her father to kill a debt into slavery, which she could be, that if, that cancels the debt. But then if the master has sexual relationships with that slave and produces children, now she's subject to being that man's wife. And so even if she's freed from the slave debt situation, she's still the guy's wife, and her children still belong to him. So it sucks. The Old Testament rules for women just suck, and the New Testament rules aren't really all that much better. So, yes, replicants are also treated as people. Sarcasm, yes. Yeah, it is. It's very much the rule for spoils of war. Yeah, I get the humor of that, but it's like, no, there's a part of me that says that that's not really all that funny, because when you really look at it, the Old Testament law is very, very much written with Jewish men in mind. It's very, very patriarchal. And so, I mean, when you consider the fact that a wife, if you wanted a wife and, there's this good looking woman wandering around who's single, just go have sex with her. And if she doesn't cry out, you just pay the shekels and you have yourself a wife. Yeah, that's kind of, sucks to be her, too bad for her, I guess. But there's just this, there really is only Israelite men, and then there's everybody else. So, but yeah, to sit there and say what it says on the screen, it says we're treated as people, not property. Yeah, he's not reading his Bible very well. So, and the New Testament kind of indicates that too. So, there is a theory, like you'll see in the Bible, how it takes such a strong view against Ashtoreth, the female fertility goddess. there is a theory that once upon a time Yahweh and Ashtoreth were God and goddess, and then for some reason the Israelites changed their theology and got rid of Ashtoreth and just had Yahweh alone. So she's like a former consort that's been divorced by Yahweh. So yeah, they used to have that. So yeah. Doesn't talk about coveting your neighbor's husband, does it? Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I can see how might take that as humorous, but with an irony principle. But it's like, no, it's not funny. It's it's this whole viewpoint that the Old Testament has that's very centered on the people that it's designed to benefit. So even within the rules of slavery, the only one that is benefited is the Jewish male. And then we create this other rule called the bond slave, which allows the Jewish man, well, I don't want to give up he may have a wife and kids, but those wife and kids still belong to the master. Okay, if I want to keep my wife and kids, now I have to bond slave myself. So even the Jewish men, if they found themselves in that, it's just really well, I guess that assumes. Okay, so you're also assuming that these people that are actually writing the Old Testament didn't know their history, which I would agree with you. At the time, though, slavery has been pretty ubiquitous. I mean, even raiders, in a sense, keep slaves. Okay, if you have a real anarchical situation where you have raider tribes, they still keep technical slaves, sex slaves, and whatever. Is there any legal rights or any of that bullshit? No, but effectively, that's what they are. Yeah, you end up at this point with the rich Israelites are in a very commanding position over their own brothers, but over everybody else, they're also in a very commanding position because my commenters will bring up an excellent point, though, in the fact that this is not history. Okay, this is mythology being written by people many hundreds of years after the fact who didn't know the actual history of the area. And at the time, you had these tribalistic warlords that were fighting each other. And so you did have the Israelite tribes and the Hittites and the Jebusites and all those guys. But it was like this internal conflict. And so slavery as a legal concept might not have existed. So they're imposing a law on a time period that didn't maybe necessarily act as if they're acting as if somehow the law existed at that time, and maybe it didn't. So commenters in my comment section have a very valid point, because it's like, did this actually exist at the time when we're talking about segments from the mythology that's being created in 600 BC? So, but it does give you an interesting point that in 600 BC, what the legal rights of people were questioned as. So yeah, and it's still lots of slavery, unfortunately. Yeah, I often wondered that too. I mean, it's like, how do you treat a wife that's given to you by your master, and how do you treat children from that wife? I think that would be a very odd social situation. I would find myself. Well, yeah, that's the thing, because you're dealing with mythology here, okay? But they're writing how they think society should have operated back then, and it wouldn't be so bad, but people take it seriously. Like this video, for instance, is a good example of people having to take this stuff seriously instead of dismissing it as uh, as mythology. By the way, hi Katie. I kind of missed welcoming you in, and Ape, you as well. Thanks. Yes, people in power look for ways to maintain and found religious belief to be very effective in maintaining the status quo. Yes, very true. And I think that's what's going on with the writers of the Old Testament. I think what's happening is they're trying to justify current conditions that they're writing in. And I think these laws were more about, these laws have existed for 600 years, when the reality is, if you go back in the mythology, probably these tribalistic time period didn't have like an official legal slavery. You just had people being domineering, like, I control you because I can do with you what I want. Okay, so yes, there's a valid point to be made that this is all mythology anyway, but people take it seriously. All right, let's see what he justifies this one with.
Because Israelite servitude was not rooted in racism or even classism.
How do you explain then that people outside the Israelite faith are considered property in perpetuity and chattel slavery, while the people inside are not?
Servants had legal protections. In Israel, if a master, more like an employer, permanently...
Oh, I saw you try to sneak that in there. It's not like an employer. If I'm not allowed to impose my modern understanding of slavery from American history, you're not allowed to impose your understanding of employer-employee relationships onto the text either. So there's that.
Injured a servant, the servant would be set free without any debt.
Yes, but the injury had to be permanent. There's also Exodus 21:16, I believe. Yeah, if you're not getting paid, you're not an employer. Okay, I don't care what the reason is. If you're not getting paid, if you're over people that are not getting paid for their work and you're telling them what to do and they have to do it, that's not an employer. That's a master-slave relationship. Absolutely correct. But the only time the servant would be set free if something permanently was done, like they lost a hand or an eye or an ear, then yes, the law says to free that slave on account of the eye, ear, or hand or foot or whatever. But there's also, I think it's Exodus 21:16 that says you're only obligated to pay for a crime against the slave if the slave dies after you beat them. I want to know how you have a rule where we're having regulations on how much you can beat your slave, and yet somehow those slaves are being treated as fellow humans and with equality. That's what I want to know. So,
And to strike and kill a servant meant capital punishment.
yes, it did. And it's the only one redeeming part of the law in this entire thing. Okay, it's, excuse me, it's the only time you see slaves being upheld in the Old Testament. Like they have the right to live, but not too much else. But the idea still exists that there are so many ways to beat your slave, not cut off limbs, and they almost die, and then you're still okay. They're all right. It's only when they die that there's a problem. So
Israel was also commanded to harbor runaway slaves from surrounding nations where they...
I want to know where he's getting that. He doesn't give a verse reference, and I couldn't find it. So maybe somebody else knows it, but it's like, it depends on the runaway slave. I guess. My guess is there's something there, but it's just like, were they commanded to harbor runaway slaves? I'm trying to. It's funny that he doesn't give a verse reference there, because it would have cleared up my confusion. So there's, yeah, okay.
They might be treated cruelly. To harbor runaway slaves in other countries often meant the death penalty. And Exodus 21:16 demands the death penalty for slave traders.
That is not what it says. He's counting on the ignorance of people and not people not following it up. It's one of the few times he actually gives a scriptural reference in this video. But Exodus 21:16 actually talks about kidnappers, not slave traders. It's specifically dealing with the idea of kidnapping, not the slave trade. So I don't know where he imposes the idea of slave trade on there. So yeah. Yeah. Masters do not have to take care of him. He comes out with anything. Nope. He went in with nothing and he comes out with nothing. So, yeah, they won't have time to revolt. Yep. It's a pretty, slavery is a really good system for doing that. So, so, yeah, I just, I don't know. I'm on this one. He's not lying in the fact that there's a death penalty for kidnappers. And I suppose in certain contexts, you'd have to kidnap in order to get slaves, but you'd have to prove that. But Israelites aren't forbidden from buying from slave traders from the nations around them without thought of where the slaves come from. So, oh, thank you, my dear. I appreciate that so much, Earl, for the entertainment. Yeah, this is entertainment. I find taking on biblical nonsense because it's so easy. I mean, like our commenter earlier, it's like, dude, do you want me to read certain passages and I'm just telling you to read the rest of your Bible? But it's a classic example of somebody who's been indoctrinated to only look at the side of the scripture that allows you to see what you want to see, but it doesn't involve any of that. Yeah, in and of itself, it's immoral. I'll get to that in a minute, but with the rest of the video, entertainment is a funny thing. Yeah, it's Sunday, Saturday. It depends on where you're at. It's still Saturday night here in the United States, so time travel made possible by YouTube.
Roman slavery in the context of the New Testament era was a different system. Roman slaves who were taken in battle would often learn trades that they could use to be in a better financial situation.
Okay, would often is being very generous, by the way. Roman slavery sucked too, just to be clear.
For the rest of their lives once slavery was over. They were allowed to marry, have families, purchase their freedom, and also have others purchase their freedom.
True. Roman slavery was a step above Israelite slavery, granted. It it's still shit, but it's still a step above. So there's that. So, yes, gladiatorial events. Yes, you learn to trade. You learn how to kill people for entertainment's sake. Okay, so in the context of slavery, maybe the entertainment content isn't too far off with the Romans. Thanks, Fred. Outstanding. I appreciate that so much. So, well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. To ignore biblical slavery, believers are forced to lie. That's one danger of religion. Yes, it is. This video is becoming a very one lies strung up. And it's not just lies of omission. Like a lot of slavery videos I see by Christians, they just admit the stuff. Like, what's his face? The black guy that talked about slavery a few years ago. His video was correct, but he omitted a lot of stuff. He left a lot of stuff out. And so a lot of it was lying by omission. This guy straight up says that they weren't allowed to take prisoners of war in a Bible that clearly says, hey, take people as prisoners of war and as war slaves, and makes it so there's that. Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, the Roman system was so much better, and then you have gladiatorial slaves, you have what is not talked about, because he's talking about the upper crust of Roman society who had slaves. They wanted high quality slaves that could do like complicated tasks for them. But the vast majority of slaves, even in the Roman world, you have people that are basically cutting down trees, doing the dangerous work of mining, that often ended in death. I mean, being a Roman slave shortened your lifespan. Let's be honest. Okay. Yes. Yes, they were fun leaders. Yes, they are. Yeah, they finally, some emperors got rid of the gladiatorial games because of the problems with it. So, yeah, North Korean experience. There you go. But yeah, but he's very much in the context of the upper crust slavery, where you had, tutors for your children that were slaves. You had people that did accounting, that could do accounting, were slaves. But they treated, people very, very badly. I mean, you don't have, one of the unspoken things about Roman slavery is there were a lot of slaves that were sex slaves, that they were there to put on a show. You'd invite a couple of slaves to a party, have them go at it, and everybody would watch. It's like, it's the notion that the Romans somehow had a better slavery system, I suppose, but it's still slavery bullshit. So, yeah, well, yeah. I know you're being funny, but yeah, it's like the whole issue of slavery comes up, but it's going to get funnier when this video goes along.
The New Testament, like the Old Testament, recognizes the humanity of every person, regardless of their station in life. The Apostle Paul even considered Roman slaves to be co-workers in his ministry.
Well, he mentions them as co-workers in his ministry, but he still acknowledges their slavery and never says it's wrong that they're slaves. So there's that. Yeah. Oh, yeah, really. Really. Yeah, this is where he's really pushing it. Theocracy would be like, yep, it is. Hitchens made that point, I believe, that it's like you're volunteering as theocracy is just a celestial North Korea with religious beliefs. So, yeah, there's that aspect of it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not letting Islam off the hook either. As many commenters have pointed out, from a historical fact point of view, the Middle East and Islamic people have taken more African Americans as slaves than even here in the United States in its history. So it's the slave trade that existed in all directions out of Africa is horrible, no matter which way you look at it. And that was included at the time of the Apostle Paul. So, yeah. Slaves obey your masters. Master of puppets, yes, very much so. I always love it when theists come here and say Jesus is king, and I have to mention, yeah, insert Metallica's King Nothing here. So, so there we go.
Now, because slavery was a common part of the culture in which Christianity was birthed, first century Christians were both slaves and slave owners. However, Christianity planted the seeds that would ultimately lead to the undermining of both ancient Roman slavery as well as modern slavery.
Now, I'm going to say I would like to know how that is, because there is so much in the New Testament where Paul says, slaves, be obedient to your masters. Ephesians says this. Colossians says it. The most notorious one to me is 1 Timothy 6, which isn't Paul. It's probably pseudo-Paul. But it says, be obedient as if you're being, or is that, maybe it's the Colossians or Ephesians one that says, be obedient as to God of Christ. But the theme throughout the Pauline letters is, yeah, we're all equal in Christ as far as salvation, but you all still have your social constructs, which I'm not going to interfere with or challenge. It's interesting that God seems to miss a lot of opportunities to end slavery. I'm just saying. So, yes, King Nothing. Hey, Goodman. He's going to try to make it that Christians have always been against slavery, and that's just a load of shit. He's going to lie about that quite a bit here in a minute, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, exactly. It's like See, I consider the Old Testament story of the Exodus from Egypt to be a missed opportunity, because if you really wanted to distinct your God as different at that point, here's what you do. They come out of Egypt and you say, you know what, guys, remember how you were slaves in Egypt and how much that sucked? You know what? Slavery just in general sucks. So we're going to have a prohibition against slavery in Israel. Nobody is to be a slave, not among yourselves or from the tribes. Everybody is a free worker here. And that would have actually upped the economic status of the country right there. Because if everybody's working freely, they usually do a better job, especially if they're working with it for a wage. So they make poor slaves. Yeah, the Romans didn't have a high opinion of Britain at the time. But yeah, if he planted this, if God in the New Testament planted the seeds that would end slavery, he's very subtle about it. And damn, did it take a long, long time to do it? You know, it's a pretty poor crop then. Better be careful. Yeah, he hasn't really talked to the Southern Baptist Convention, has he? It's a point I'm going to make later when he makes this another point. I think so, because I would argue that you have to enslave yourself to a system of thought in any religion. Christianity is just one of them, but Islam is very much about being a slave to Allah. Um, all the Abrahamic religions kind of have that idea of slavery, but other religions, you have to submit your will to another will, basically. So, yeah. But, yeah. Let's see what else he's going to say. I want to get through this video.
And this leads to the third point. The Bible demands equal treatment, regardless of race or class. The Apostle Paul, living at the time of the Roman Empire, instructed slaves to obey their masters. However, he also wrote that there is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male or female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus.
Okay. So all he's really done there is point out the great contradiction of the Apostle Paul's theology. And I would say at that point, he's pulling it out of context, because in the context of society, okay, and he's trying to say everybody's supposed to be treated equally regardless of who they are, right? Except if you're a wife, then you have to submit to your husband. Except if you're a slave, you have to submit to your master. The slave master relationship and the traditional view of Christian marriage automatically puts somebody as subservient or lesser than another person. Okay, it's a load of shit for him to sit there and gloss over the multiple times that Paul or pseudo Paul says, slaves be obedient to your masters, and then say, oh, we're all the same. So it's kind of, in my own country, it's kind of like the founding fathers saying everybody should be free, which is a great concept and far ahead of where Paul was. And yet many of them owned slaves, but also many of them were abolitionists. So acknowledging the fight was on, but even in Christianity, you're going to have a back and forth. Yeah, I think they do. So, yeah, I shall not permit a woman to teach a man. Segregation was a thing, and it was brought on by the Bible. Yes, Jesus also, Ali Berea, you're right, welcome. But also, yeah, Jesus literally tells a woman he shouldn't give the bread to dogs, and he's talking about the woman's race, and she has to counter with, well, even the dogs eat from crumbs from the master's table. So she has to put herself in this subservient racial position in order to get help from Jesus. It's so there's that aspect of it. Hey, it's okay. A lot of people listen while they're working on this channel. It's a podcast. It really is. I run a podcast with videos attached on YouTube is basically what I do. So it's okay. Yeah, all religions seem to have the doctrines to keep the general population beneath their power base. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The fact that religion and government both rise at about the same time in human civilization is an interesting phenomenon and not an accident. So there's a reason why these things go together. But let's see what else he has to say.
Christian masters and slaves were instructed to engage in activities like eating meals and then the Lord's Supper together that would undermine and subvert slavery. Even more.
Okay, but it took how many centuries for it to do that? And it doesn't seem to have worked during the ancient Christian period at all, because that continued, slavery continued, even among Christians, because of all the verses that said, masters, treat your slaves well, but slaves, you have to be obedient like you're serving Christ. Yeah, I'm having the same reaction, as if that is the thing that's going to end slavery. You start having a meal together, Last Supper together. So what? It doesn't mean that you're going to change class society. It seems strange to me that a God who wanted freedom from slavery never openly says so, and also uses slavery as a concept, a theological concept of how you're supposed to serve Jesus. Because slaves are told to be an example of this, to be an example of how to follow Christ. Okay, that's a theological concept of the master-slave relationship between Jesus and his people. So yeah. Yeah, it's totally cool for I can see that. I can see that because the anti-Semiticism of the Roman Catholic Church started pretty early. The killers of the Christ thing. Not sure how many centuries for segregation to go away. Probably, if you include the times of slavery, yeah, the entire time until, I don't know, you don't really see a total end of real segregation until the 1970s. So quite a while. Quite a while. So
New Testament writers instructed them using the language of family intimacy, such as greet one another with a holy kiss.
But that wasn't for everybody. That was certain people that he was told to do that.
Thus, the New Testament is clear that our value as human beings, slave or free, is the same.
No, it's not that clear. I'm not gonna. Sorry. There's a reason why old Southern preachers before the Civil War preached these passages as a justification of slavery. It was not a done deal. And when you have the same writer saying everybody, there's neither slave nor free, but then it turns around and says slaves be obedient to your masters, there's obviously a difference in value as human beings. Slavery inherently has as a part of it that somebody is more valuable than somebody else, that the master is always more valuable than slaves. Okay, slaves are expendable, but the master is not. Okay, so this idea, so that, it's just, I don't know where he gets this. Okay. Holy kiss my, yeah, I wonder what else was going on there, Paul. So, yes, and this is the point I was trying to make earlier, because even though officially segregation ended with a lot of amendments, and it ended with the Civil Rights Act, in the 1960s, it still continued with a lot of states in the South openly defying segregation, desegregation laws. Well, I think I remember hearing a story when I was a teenager in high school of somebody still trying to keep segregation alive in their town. And so that was the 1980s. So for a couple decades at least, segregation practically did not disappear. So yeah. So there's that. But no, they're not treated the same. The master-slave relationship inherently has an inequality to it.
In dozens of places. Christians are instructed to love everyone, We are told to be kind and compassionate to one another, to not show partiality in judging, and not to show favoritism.
Okay. Ephesians 4:32, that's true. But it says one another, so it might be referring to just those in the Christian cult. Don't show partiality in judging, Deuteronomy 1:17. And yet there's a lot of partiality that does take place in judging. Like a few weeks ago, I did the fact that David and his wife Bathsheba get off with adultery when they should have been killed. So there's partiality shown by God. Don't show favoritism. But let's put all of this into the context of master-slave relationships. How do you say you're being kind and compassionate to a slave if you're a master? Just by the very idea that you think you own them and their labor. How are you not showing partiality by saying masters should be obeyed? Okay. How are you not showing favoritism when you're saying a certain elite ruling class known as the masters get to keep all the stuff that the other group produces? It's like, sorry, it's very much a a problem for the Bible. Okay, and even society today, because we're still dealing with that. But you can say all these things in the Bible, but it just shows more contradiction to me in the biblical statements than does actually anything else.
The Bible is unequivocally opposed to the idea that one person is better or more valuable than another.
Then why does it have the concept of slavery at all? Because the concept of slavery in and of itself says that one group of people, the masters, are better and they have the right to rule and control others, the slaves. Sorry, that's just straight up double talk. Yes. Jesus condoned slavery. Absolutely did. He talked about stories about masters and servants all the time. Those servants weren't being paid for their work. In fact, he tells the story of the talents and definitely expected his slave who had nothing to produce more. So, yes, it absolutely, he does condone slavery. He never condemns it. That's for damn sure. Okay. He even tells stories with slaves in it. And when the slaves don't act properly, he calls them evil and wicked. So, yes. No, it's not. I've been pointing that out this entire time during this video. It is not different at all. Yeah. Only theists want to say this because they know that they know slavery is wrong. It just shows to me, sir, that you actually do have a little bit of a morality that's better than your biblical characters. So there's that. Yeah, I don't think Jesus was any better than me anyway. Yes, it's disgustingly dishonest. Okay, and the problem is this video has a lot of views, Earl. Like people come to this channel to get answers to this stuff that they're going to say as Christians to others. And the problem is this answer is so flipping dishonest. I'm not going to let him play. I do too from these theists, but it's like, it's literally sometimes when they come here, it's like, it's the same stuff and they're just troping. And yeah. And like his comments, like, have you not been listening to the video for the last 30 minutes while you've probably been timed out? I have literally said that there is no difference and demonstrated it, but we're going to keep it. It's just them parroting as usual.
In this way, the New Testament set the direction for the abolition of slavery in the Western world, which leads...
You know what would really set the direction for the abolition of slavery everywhere Christianity's touched and wherever Judaism touched is if you straight up had a command saying that slavery is wrong. Okay, why does God seem to take so damn long with this issue? Okay, and trust me, it would cause me to look at the Bible in a completely higher moral plane if it actually did say slavery was a bad thing like in 600 BC, okay, and that it should be abolished. There is nothing in the Bible that says that slavery should be abolished. You're absolutely cherry picking history and a bunch of things. Yes, why was there slavery in the South? Yes, because there were preachers preaching that slavery was okay. Okay, and they were using the Bible to do it. They gave Bibles out to slaves that were slave Bibles that didn't change the text of the Bible at all, but had commentary in the margins about this proves why our society is still following the Bible because we have slaves. And so, yeah.
To the final point. Christians ended the slave trade. The Christianization of Europe eventually led to the disappearance of slavery until its modern form emerged in the 15th century. And then it was a Christian, William Wilberforce, who led the effort to eliminate the slave trade in England. It was Christian abolitionist preachers during the Second Great Awakening of the early 19th century that started the sustained effort to abolish slavery in the United States. It was a Christian pastor, Martin Luther King Jr., who led the civil rights movement of the 20th century in the United States. This followed a long history of Christians working for human rights because of the gospel's commitment to the equal dignity of every person.
Okay, I wish I had the meme pulled up of everything that guy just said is bullshit. Okay. Don't get me wrong. William Wilberforce certainly was a force in England in getting rid of slavery. You also had various people that were
The history
Christians.
of slavery is a difficult and important conversation.
But there's definitely I hate to say it, but he's definitely not engaging all the Christians that were also pro-slavery. The Second Great Awakening, I would argue, is one of the worst things that ever happened to America because it made us very, very religious. Yes, this is the point. If slavery was really a thing that God wanted off the planet, he could have done so with one of the 10 commandments instead of the 3 that were him stroking his own ego. He could have easily said, hey, slavery, is bad that you were slaves in Egypt, so don't own a slave. And then half the Bible, Old Testament, a good chunk of the Old Testament would have disappeared because it's regulations of the slave trade. And all of a sudden it would be gone. So, yeah, it just shows that some of them were in defiance of what they believe. I would also argue that the Second Great Awakening happened in the North and to a lesser extent in the South. Southern preachers still continued to preach pro-slavery. Many of the religions in the United States had pro-slavery stances. I'm sorry, this is completely false when it comes to, you had a few notable Christian exceptions fighting against slavery, but most of the anti-slave abolition movement came right out of John Locke. The whole idea of everybody having the natural rights to, as Thomas Jefferson would put it, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness was completely antithetical to anything that religion said. So, and that's where it came of it from. So, yes, this is the problem that was mostly pro-slavery at the time. You know what? I can't think of anything right now. I literally have a video in the hopper right now where I'm talking about why I can't go back to Christianity, and part of it is that very idea right there. I'm still waiting for religion and God to have done anything good that isn't poison at some point. Yeah, you have to not covet your slaves. Yeah, he does say bond slave in one of those. Yep. Yeah, or even their ass. Yep, you can own another human, but you can't eat shellfish. Very valid point. So, but he's definitely changing and altering history there quite a bit. One of my favorite abolitionists is Thomas Paine, and he's arguably an atheist. And a lot of the abolitionist movement came more out of the Enlightenment thinkers, where they had these idea that every human being had natural rights. That's something you will not find in the Bible. I've challenged many Christians to show me the idea of natural rights in the Bible, and the best they can do is, well, we're all created in the image of God. I said, and then the law proceeds to completely defy that idea by having master slave relationships, having women subservient to men, on and on the list goes. Okay. If we're all equal, then why does this shit continue? Why doesn't God just get rid of it? So, okay. All right. All right. Yes, I agree with that too, because a lot of the Old Testament is about punishment. And I get the idea of people have of justice. But I think when you just put people behind bars, I particularly have a problem with putting people behind bars that didn't do anything violent. I'd rather find them have them find a way to rehabilitate themselves and redeem themselves as far as society is concerned. That doesn't involve being behind bars. I think you're just wasting their time, and that's fine, I guess. But I've never really understood the prison system all that much. Um, so it's just one of those things that I have more questions than answers about, and a lot more objections than pros. So I can see like violent offenders so they don't hurt somebody else. Okay, I get that part, but nonviolent crimes, I really don't have. I have a problem with people being in prison for those. So that's me, my opinion.
Slavery is a difficult and important conversation. But the next time someone tries to undermine the Bible's authority by suggesting that it endorses slavery, remember, the slavery talked about in the Bible is more like servitude.
Nope, no, it's not.
In both the Old and New Testament, slaves were to be treated as people and not as property.
Except it calls slaves property in Leviticus 25. And how is slavery in and of itself not treating people as property?
The Bible demands equal treatment, regardless of race or class.
But it certainly promotes a vast amount of sexism between males and females. It also, how do you have a non-difference in treatment of a class of people that's classified as master and the other as slave? I don't think we really got past how that concept can even exist if that's true. A secular idea of equality actually gets you there, but certainly not the Bible.
And the entire gospel highlights that in Christ we are all one. Christians ended the slave trade.
That's a debatable point. I would say also Christians promoted and kept the slave trade going. So if you're going to take both sides of that coin, I would say the Christians that did try to end the slave trade were doing so in defiance of their Bible and defiance of their religion. So
not only does the Bible not endorse slavery, it provided both the perspective and the motivation to those who fought against it the hardest.
Does anybody else find it hilarious that he has an image of Mother Teresa in the middle of this shit? Does anybody else find that funny? Because I found it hilarious as soon as I saw it. I'm like, really? You're going to put her out of here as an example of being a good Christian that fought against bullshit? Come on. Yeah, you and me both, huh? So, yeah, if we're all equal, why are we not equal? Oh, yeah, I agree, Cam, by the way. It is a business now, and that's why it keeps going. It's interesting that the prison system in the United States, the people that own it definitely endorse certain candidates to keep it. Yeah, it is really all about revenge. There's a sense of justice that needs to be there too, because I don't think somebody, even a murder victim deserves some sort of justice for what happened to them from the perpetrator. But it's like, it can't be about revenge, and that's a problem. Revenge and justice are two different things. So valid point. But yes, it is very much a private affair, and that's part of the problem. It's one of the things I would like to outlaw in the United States is prison system being private. It should be run by the government. It's one of the few things I think the government should run, and they should be held accountable for how they run it. But private prison systems aren't always looked at, and we've seen the problems of that. So, yes, she's awful. Um, the thing with Mother Teresa is it's like I've got to reread The Missionary Position by Christopher Hitchens, but you read that book and you're like, oh my God, this woman had a great publicist as to how good she was because she was a total piece of shit as a human being. So, yeah, it's ironic more than funny, I suppose, too. But I laughed as soon as really, you're going to pull her out as a paragon of virtue? That's just stupid. So, yeah, it's kind of doubt it. I don't know if Christianity didn't do it. It's certainly Christians. I think the Christians that did join the abolition movement were doing it in defiance of their book. So their book definitely endorses it. So, but yes, you do run the risk of actually winning that argument. So, hey, Majestic, good to see you. Yeah, it's putting the problem off. That's my problem with it too. Yeah, she had, a lot of people, oh, she must have used that money to alleviate the suffering of the people in the houses of the dying, but she didn't do a damn thing. No pain relievers, nothing, because she believes suffering brought you closer to Christ. And so the suffering of others around her brought her closer to Christ and them closer to Christ. And so she did not a damn thing. All that money went to building more convents in her own glory. So, yeah, there really isn't. There are nuns that worked for her who came out of that and said, no, she's not all that. so, but yeah, so that's kind of his 4 points. The rest of this video is him just kind of endorsing the channel and stuff like that. So I do want to do something as kind of a recap of my objections to this and how I would answer this question of does the Bible endorse slavery? So I'm going to remove him. I'm going to put my stuff just so everybody remembers a few salient points about slavery in the Bible, that war captives were indeed a thing, even though he says it's not. Numbers 31, verse 28 makes that clear, that people were part of the spoils of war. And Numbers 31, 15 through 17, have you allowed all the women to live? He asked them. They were the ones who followed Balaam's advice and enticed the Israelites to be unfaithful to the Lord in pure incident, so that the plague struck the Lord's people. Now kill all the boys and kill every woman who has slept with a man, but save yourselves every girl who has never slept with a man. So there you go. Yeah. Yeah, she's definitely an ignorant horror show. Yeah, it's revenge porn. I'm glad that I agree with you, Grumpy. I'm kind of glad this didn't really happen, but it goes to the mindset of the writers of the Old Testament that they thought that this was an okay thing. Okay, so the writers that were editing and writing in the 600 BCs to about 450 BC, they thought that this was an okay thing, like this was a normal part of society. So there's that war captives were a thing, and so there's that aspect of it. Some other things to consider that he didn't mention. Sabbath year of Jubilee have an exception. It only applied to Jewish men, really. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some from the temporary residents among living you and members of the clans born in your country, and they will become your property. The idea that the Bible doesn't refer to things as property is blown away here. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property, can make them your slaves for life, or you but you are not to rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. Thus, an endorsement of racism as well, because only Jewish men were actually exempted from all this shit. So everybody else is there. Let's see, what else did I write down? Beating your slave. Yeah, they were supposed to be treated like fellow human beings, but this verse says anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result. But they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property. Another verse that refers to slaves, even Jewish male slaves, as property. So, okay, they're not property. It's more of an employer-employee relationship, but the Bible refers to slaves twice as property, at least, if not more. Let's see. New Testament needs slavery for theological concepts and endorses it. Jesus uses slaves as representative servants of God in his stories multiple times. Paul refers to himself as a bond slave of Jesus Christ. You can't understand that theological concept of being a bond slave of Jesus Christ without understanding what a bond slave is, which is a willful slave in the Old Testament. Paul uses slavery as an example of slaves to sin under its complete mastery. If he had the idea that, then, sin is just our employer and we're employees, it's not really all that bad. All of a sudden, the meaning of the word slave suddenly changes for the Christian at that point. Yes, Ephesians 6, 5 and 6 is the one that says obey masters as if obeying Christ or God himself. Colossians 3:22 put it in this way: slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything and do it, not only when the eye is on you and to curry their favor, but with sincere heart and reverence for the Lord. In other words, just keep being obedient. And as far as Jesus using slaves, there's several stories that Jesus tells of slaves-master relationships. And it's always the slaves that end up being a problem, never the master. So just a note. And I think lastly, my favorite one, if those that say the New Testament doesn't endorse slavery and leads us to emancipation of slaves, is 1 Timothy 6, 1 through 2. All you are under the yoke of slavery should consider their masters worthy of full respect, so that the God's name and our teaching may not be slandered. In other words, you need to obey your master so Christianity isn't slandered for rising up disobedience. Those who have believing masters should not show them disrespect just because they are fellow believers, and then they should serve them even better because their masters are dear to them as fellow believers and are devoted to the welfare of their slaves. And so the Bible not only promotes the idea of slavery and endorses it, but says, these masters are really taking really good care of you. And so you should really take good care of them. So that's the biblical. This is all the shit that this video left out. And there's more shit I could have done. I'm sorry that I could go on and on forever on this issue because there's so much the Bible talks about with slavery. Yeah, it's Jesus dungeon. Yep. It's gross because I want you to consider the implications of some of this. Especially if the master is male and the female Christian is the slave. Okay. See, this is the problem with the whole master-slave relationship is it leads to all kinds of gross shit and always has. I'm glad Enlightenment thinkers came up with the idea of simply saying, particularly Locke, maybe everybody should have the same rights, the same right to liberty, their own freedom, to pursue their own happiness instead of working for the happiness of other people. Maybe that should be the thing. So, but yes, this is very gross. All of this is really gross because there's absolutely a justification of sexual slavery for young virgin girls in particular. There's an absolute justification of abject obedience of the slaves to masters in all of this. There is the idea of racist and sexism and everything in there too, because Israelite male slaves go free. Everybody else just has to suck it up. The problem with this video is I look at it now, it is absolutely vile propaganda. And, it's like you are deliberately avoiding a whole bunch of shit by omission. And they straight up lied a couple of times saying, oh, they weren't allowed to take slaves as spoils of war. That's bullshit. Okay. If you believe the Bible's real and real history, they did do that. Okay. It's just, every once in a while I have to react to a video like this because I just have to realize the absolute mind fuck that religion does to people. We had a good example of the theist that showed up here. Okay, because it's like that person can't see past the fact they have to cling to the verses of scripture that push their narrative, but they absolutely avoid all the stuff I just mentioned because they can't deal with the direct wording of it. And it's the way indoctrination works. Okay, I used to do this where, not really realizing, but I was like, just cling to the stuff that's uplifting in Christianity, cling to the verses of scripture that are good. Never encourage your flock to look at the difficult passages of scripture really closely. And then when it does come up in conversation in public, refer them to a video like this, which will absolutely teach them how to lie about it. Okay, it's like, yeah, we are born to serve. Yes. Yeah, horseshit. Yep, I agree. Yeah, let the anger go. I feel you. Yeah, it's definitely a woosah moment. I do videos like this, and I know they're not always as entertaining and fun. Like last week, we had a hell of a time talking about romance and dating, and I ended it with the pickup lines Christians probably shouldn't use and shit like that. But I have to do a video like this every once in a while to remind myself that Christopher Hitchens was absolutely right. Religion poisons everything. It poisons everything. And it poisons the human mind to the point that they can justify slavery in any point. And in my opinion, the reason slavery lasted so long was because of religion. Because religion says suffering and servitude bring you closer to God or closer to whatever. It's that mentality that says if I submit my will to somebody else, I'm in a better place. And it's like that is poisonous shit to me. And I have to remind myself every once in a while, this is why I do this. Okay. It does make me angry. Like this video, when I first watched it, made me angry as hell because it was so much lies. There was so much disinformation. There's so much narrative that's there that just isn't true or could be questioned. So, when I was in disciples, it sort of insulted me when I brought up hard questions. Galileo was reading the Bible every day, like my pastor told me to. Yeah, isn't it funny how that works, Cam? Isn't that funny how that works? Yeah. So yeah, it's like I don't know. It really just. I struggled with my deconversion for like literally 4 decades because I had so much emotional attachment to my faith. But probably more like 3 decades because the first 10 years I was a kid and it didn't matter. But it's what my parents and my church taught me to be too. But yeah, you don't ask the hard questions. Don't question God. Don't question the Bible. But that appears, everywhere. Yeah, enslaving everybody to your ideology is always a bad move, no matter what ism is used to justify it. I think not just colonialism. It's important to nail down the pickup lines. You should watch the end of last week's live stream on Saturday. Then the Christians pickup lines that a lot of these people came up with were genuinely hilarious. So slavery is BDSM. Who'd have thought? But think about it. Why does that stuff continue to exist and thrill people? It's a for a long time in our human evolution, slavery, having somebody tied up that you could beat and have sex with was a part of the culture for a long time in human history. And so I don't know. Sometimes I think it survives for that reason. Sometimes if you listen to people that practice it, it's not about that at all. But It's hard to say. This is an education. Obey. Yeah. All right. The only person you should really obey is your benevolent dictator, the rabid atheist, and he doesn't give a shit 99.99% of the time. So, so there's that. Yeah, meek shall inherit the earth. I've always thought that's a very interesting expression. It's a political one too. You're hitting the nail on the head there because it says, "Oh well, yeah, these other people push me around and beat me up and do all this stuff to me, but I'm just being meek, and someday I'll inherit the earth." And the only time you really truly do that is when they're burying you. You did inherit the earth, indeed. So, so yes, rabid benevolence. Yes. I am your rabid benevolent dictator for life. Um, but I run this government pretty much like anarchy most of the time, with occasional absolute dictatorship thrown in 1% of the time. So because I love our community because we have a lot of varied opinions, Paul. Like, but we still all try to get along. Okay, there's all kinds of political and social perspectives in this room right now, but we've all agreed that it's not worth being assholes to each other about. It's like we need to talk about it, not necessarily berate each other, and I kind of like that. So I do throw people in timeout. I prefer to call it a timeout because that seems so fitting. Because putting somebody in the corner with their nose to the corner and telling them to stay there for 5 minutes or 30 minutes seems like a small sentence. So yes, I killed Earl brings back the rabid atheist meme. I love this Earl, by the way. It's hilarious every time I see it. You've met very few meek Christians. I would agree with that too. I don't meet a lot of meek ones either. They're absolutely convinced that they're right. Just ask them. So yeah, I mean, the thing with Buddhism that I struggle with is I've had some Buddhists come to this channel and straight up tell me that in a sense they don't believe in a personal God, so they're kind of atheist, but they have all these spiritual, what I consider superstition nonsense beliefs that I tell them, I said, you don't have any proof of that. So, but I've never met a Buddhist that I didn't really get along with on this channel. I've met a few others that are kind of assholes, but so. Yeah, that could be true. Meek statement they were saying, don't hurt their slaves or meeker and will grant. I don't know. Yes, their God says they're right. See, the thing is, Rimmer, you live in Sweden, and every time you talk about it, the more I have this desire to pack up and leave. That I need to go back to the old country that I come from. Because my genetics says that I come from Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, so it's like I could be going home, in a certain sense. If I didn't have my family and my friends that I love here very much, and I want to stay close to them, I probably would have packed up and left a long time ago. So, yeah, that's part of my problem with it too, John. There is definitely some abusive systems there too. It wasn't so damn cold. Probably why you're not coming up here. Today is a warm day in February, Earl. It's 26 degrees here in Michigan right now after a week of being in single digits. So, yeah. So, but I'd feel right at home in Sweden and Norway and Denmark with the cold. I'd be right there. Yeah, that's another problem I have with it too. It's like there's no female monks. There's some nuns, but monks no. There's an inherent sexism to it. So yeah, it's too cold. Yeah. Well, Yeah, sizeism. Is there sizeism too? Yeah, it'll stay on this crappy earth. Yeah, I suppose that's. I mean, why inherit something that the religion also believes is going to be burned away and made out of, gotten out rid of, so he can make way for the new heaven and the new earth? I mean, from a theological system, what are they actually inheriting here? Is a good question. I've always found that a very see all the Jesus's blessed are's. I now question as whether they're good things or not, because it seems like, as I go through my Life of Christ series, we're going to get into some of the teachings of Christ. And one of the things I'm going to say is there might be some evidence here that Jesus actually existed simply because he acts like a cult leader in what he says. And um, blessed whatever are because they will have this later is really a cult leader thing where you're going to give a promise of some later future blessing if you're meek and subservient and all this other shit that the blessings kind of indicate. And that's one of the things that really shows him as a cult leader. -2C, that is cold. Actually, it might be a little warm where you're at, ain't it? Yeah, I'm not really sure they're blessings either. The more I look at them, it's like even the one to Thomas, blessed who are not seen and yet believed. It's like you're promoting the idea of just believe and don't think about it. Okay, so when you look at the Beatitudes, it's like, are they basically emotional indoctrination tools? Okay, so yeah, it's kind of one of those things. Yes, there are many heavens to choose from. New heavens and new earth. Yeah. Yes, blessed are the poor in spirit. But it's the thing about such a statement, grumpy librarian, is I can use that as an indoctrination tool to justify being in poverty. Because it's kind of like what Mother Teresa did. Because she justified the poverty of people by making it a blessing. She justified the suffering of the lower class by being it a blessing. It's the whole idea of the Beatitudes. When you look at them, it's like you're really justifying some shitty things to people and saying they should just be content with it. And it's a very cult leader type attitudes. Yep, the arrogant live up in the streets of gold. -28C? Jesus, Majestic. You're not going outside, are you? I faced that kind of temperatures when I lived in North Dakota for 4 years going to Bible college. So I feel you. I don't just sympathize. I can absolutely empathize with that temperature right there. So, oh, yeah, Perth. Well, you guys are in summer, so you're at the end of summer. Aren't you guys coming into fall here shortly? Yeah. I mean, what would gold be at an ounce if the streets are made of it? So, pearly gates. Yeah, wealth is kind of useless. Yes, you're poor because you're evil. There you go. See, grumpy librarian, you're now thinking like a cult leader. You're thinking like a television evangelist already. If you can figure out how to make that work and make money for you, you're on to something. So, -43 last week. Jesus. Nope, nope, nope. I think I killed Earl is still a Southern belle, and she still likes the South. So that's where she's going to stay. Oh, beer season? Beery season, yeah. Because she had the money to do it. That's one of the things about Mother Teresa that Hitchens kind of points out, that the vow of poverty thing, outwardly as a show, sure, she's just this little poor nut that never changed her outfit all the time. But privately, I believe she ended up being a millionaire at the end of her life. And so she had to like donate it all. But yeah, it didn't really work. So it just didn't do that well. Yeah, probably. It's an expensive material to make streets out of. For damn sure. I don't look good with pink hair. Okay, fair enough. I'm just saying you're on to see. Here's the real trick to being part of a cult. Don't be the front man. Be the guy behind the front man that collects all the money. I'm telling you, being the treasurer of the organization is far better than being the leader of the organization because nobody's paying attention to you. I don't know. Well, yeah, fair point, Fred. Fair point. It's always beer season. Yeah, I'm still up in Michigan. I like the snow for about till January 3rd, and then it could go away. Yeah, I get it. Um, I'm not that arthritic yet, but I'm used to it. I've lived here most of my life. It's why when I get out of my comfort zone, going north or south of Michigan, it's a hard time for me. Texas was awful for me because it was way too warm, too hot, and too bright. And it was awful for me. I got the same kind of pains from the heat. So I think it's all what you grow up as. um, well, she did believe in transubstantiation of the Eucharist, so there's one thing that's transitional. Because does that mean that Jesus is transitional because his body and blood become, this wafer and wine can actually become the body and blood of Jesus Christ? Does that mean that there's a transitional element to the Eucharist in every Catholic church, like there is a trans thing going on there? Yeah, transcendental. I'm just the beauty of theology, Martin, is you can make it do anything you freaking want it to do. Once I came to that realization, it's like the whole thing ended for me. It's like, it's like, yeah, I mean, it's a valid point. I'm just saying it's a valid point theologically speaking and genetically speaking. I mean, unless God is going to make the claim that he has the Y chromosome, but he genuinely is a male, okay, and not a female, which you can make a good case for it, then yes, he would have had to, from an earthly point of view, get his other half of his chromosomes from his mother, which would have been X. So I don't know. Yes, mother trans, that's hilarious. Yes, yeah, I get you. A lot of people here in Michigan migrate slightly south after they get older, like they head to Kentucky or Tennessee, or they don't go all the way to Florida, but they migrate a little bit as it gets colder. Oh yeah, well that's because he doesn't know the advantage of staying in the shadows. See, Vance would be much more powerful. Just shut his mouth. Okay, he has to talk too much, and it doesn't make him a good second. A good second, you never notice. You never notice the second because you want them to have the ability to do all the nefarious shit and get blamed for it. So you have plausible deniability. And Vance is just not good at that role. So God save Jewish sperm. Okay, there we go. So intersex Jesus. Oh, that might be interesting. But yeah, if you're going to have a cult, okay, the second in command needs to be so almost invisible. Like you see him in the background standing there in the videos, but you never ever see him up front. That's what makes Vance a lousy second because he runs his mouth. Okay. But you want that person to be in a position where they can do all the nefarious shit. Okay. and not be, and you don't get blamed for it as the leader. Okay. It's an important thing to deal with when you're creating a cult is who's the second. I mean, look at Mormonism. Joseph Smith was the front man, but he had, He had tons of people behind him that were doing all kinds of nefarious shit. They never got noticed until he was dead. So there's that. Yeah, it's pretty much, it's halfbacks. Yeah, there's a lot of those. I'm not there yet. Yep. Yeah, a fly land that flies land in your hair and hang out for a while. Yep, that people don't notice that you're there. Okay, a good second in any cult or nefarious operation is so unnoticeable that they can do anything and nobody will notice. So that's what you want. Yeah, that was one of my favorites too. When I heard it come out of one of my friends' mouth, I said, "Are you serious? Are you really serious?" And it's like, no, it's just not reality. People make up all kinds of shit. So it's a fun thing. But yeah, if you're gonna, it's like Vance. I look at Vice President Vance, and he did his little tour of Europe. Some of you Europeans may have been very well aware of his tour. How did that go over for you? Okay, he needed to just do the tour, say nice things, and shut the hell up. Okay, but now he has to talk about how Europeans are leaving their values and all this other shit. And it's like, God damn it, shut the fuck up. Like, just shut the fuck up. Yeah, you noticed? Okay. You don't. Was he an illegal immigrant then? Okay, you should have treated him like all the illegal immigrants we treat now. Well, we actually treated them all this time except for when Biden was president. But you heard him? Okay. They are way more predictable. That's true. That is true. That's the problem I have with this because it really feels like it's the end of NATO. Because, my friends, what happens if the United States decides, in its infinite wisdom, to take the side of somebody against a NATO nation? Okay, so I don't know. So I don't know. It's one of my concerns because I've had concerns about NATO because we have nations in NATO that are like, what are they going to do to help defend anything? Yeah, it's like, but at the same time, it's like an attack on one is an attack on all. So could a member nation of NATO violate NATO by having to go to war with somebody in NATO while being in NATO? So I don't know. Yeah, Russia. What if the United States sides with Russia? That might be interesting. Oh, yeah, he's in some sort of asylum, but I'm not sure it's political. But so, I mean, it's like I'm very concerned because I don't see the point in many wars anymore. I think they're just a waste of human life. And so, yeah, there's that. They're non-aggression dreams. Yeah, yeah. Mental asylum, yes, yes. But yeah, a lot of yeah, yeah. It's fun times for all. See, that's my problem, man. I the first term of Trump, it seemed like he backed away from war, and it was one of the few things I liked about him is that he seemed to be keeping us out of war and didn't want to get involved. This time, he's being fucking aggressive, and that just bothers the hell out of me. Especially when you like insult our two nearest neighbors who haven't done anything to us. The Mexicans and the Canadians are like our two most peaceful neighbors. They don't do shit. They don't threaten us. They don't do anything against us. We have great treaties, economic treaties with them, and we just got to fuck all that up. That's what bothers me right now. So, forget Project 2025. I mean, war between democracies? Who would have thought? You know, I don't know. I think the Canadians and the Mexicans might object. I'm just saying. Um, as far as Greenland goes, I'm like, why the hell do we want it? I mean, the Danes own it. See, that's another thing. So if the United States invaded Greenland to take it, then Denmark being a NATO country, wouldn't that be a violation? And then all of NATO would have to go to war over the United States over Greenland. I mean, it's just stupid shit like this. Yeah, you make a very valid political point. It scares the shit out of me too. I don't really want winners anymore or losers. I prefer cooperation. I prefer people bury hatchets. Okay, it's just not. Well, the problem is he appointed all of them. That tells you something. I mean, he said this time when he was appointing his cabinet, he had a better understanding of what he wanted. I want you to think about that. You have a point, because I've noticed signs of that. It's just Trump's earlier in the stages of dementia than Biden was. Yeah, I know, and that's the problem. I feel bad because I really like Canadians. They're good people. Yeah, he did that, and now he's doing it even more. Um, yeah, Greenland can't be bought. That's a very valid point, Michael. Yeah. He doesn't know how the U.S. Constitution works either, and it shows in his executive orders. Like he did some executive orders, like, dude, you're literally the wording is opposite what the Constitution says. You can't do that. Okay, he doesn't understand executive orders are supposed to be connected to some sort of existing law that he is enforcing, not making up shit on his own. There's too many people on his side that think Trump should be the dictator. And I think recently he even quoted Napoleon, and that set my historical ears on edge. Like, really, the guy that turned a democracy into an imperial empire. Nice. So I not like him at all. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yes. Um, Absolutely understand what you're saying there, Earl. But yeah, he said this time that he wasn't going to listen to others, that he knew what he wanted in his cabinet this time. So he had 4 years to think about it. So, and now we see the results of that. So I don't know. I have Republican friends that are now embarrassed about him. So I said, you were embarrassed about him the last year he was in office. Why didn't you remember that before you voted for him again? So, yes, he does have help writing those executive orders down. You don't write that many executive orders yourself as a president. You tell people what you want it to do, and then they write it in the legalese that needed. So, um, yeah, it's how much he's going to be able to get away with. Okay, the federal judge that shot down his one thing about birthright citizenship. It's like, dude, this is like clearly against the 14th Amendment. Like, boldface, it's unconstitutional. Goodbye. I knew that shit was going to happen. And I think Trump knew it was going to happen too. But now he can go to his constituents and say, I tried, but the court system got in my way. And so he can blame all these people, and eventually you'll watch Republicans tear down democracy. So, yeah, I think he has a lot more yes men in his cabinet this time and women than he had before. Um, I think he has a lot more people that hero worship him more than he had before. Yeah, it's kind of hard for me too. It's like, dude, you knew what this guy was about and you still voted. I was surprised he was nominated. That was what really pissed me off. It's like, Republicans, you really want to nominate this guy again? Really? Okay, can't we get something new? Yeah, and it shows, Cam, because he will back off when things become unpopular. Have you ever noticed that? when the American people, or he becomes unpopular with Republican voters, he'll back off something he said. Okay, he's very much a panderer who panders to the biggest crowd. He likes people talking nice about him. So he does have a tendency sometimes to back off unpopular ideas. So I'm hoping that the system that our founders created will do its job too, because somebody will remind Congress, hey, grow a pair of testicles. This guy shouldn't be ruling the country. It's part your job too. You're the ones that create the laws, not him. So yeah, there might be a good case to be made for that room. That's why there's sometimes that Trump doesn't bother me that much, because I was like, I hear what he says, and I'm not sure he can pull that off. So yeah, it's a possibility. Yeah, he could be a puppet too. Yeah, he backs off, taking credit for it. When they go back up again, watch him take credit for it, though. All right, I'm trying to decipher this one. All right, clowns. All right. I get it. See, because I have mixed feelings about Trump. I think he's really a good genius at getting elected and getting people to like him or hate him. I mean, he's a very polarizing figure, and he uses that to his advantage very well. Other things I'm not so sure about him. Like, he doesn't seem to understand that he's not the CEO of a corporation. He's the executive officer of a democratic republic, and that seems to escape him. So, could be, but I don't know. I think the problem with Project 2025 is a lot of American people look at that and go, no. So I know many Christians that I have as friends don't like Project 2025 either. So yeah, he's not educated. That's true. Yes, this has been my problem for years, librarian, is that there's so much power that Congress has given to the executive branch because it's more convenient and easier. Okay. It's like, you need to get some of that power back. The founding fathers, when you listen to the Federalist Papers, they really felt that Congress and the Speaker of the House was going to be the more pivotal figure than the presidency. Like, you should be going to the Speaker of the House for your initial interview, and then we'll talk to the president afterwards about how he's going to enforce it. But they've given so many of those powers that the Speaker used to wield to the presidency. It makes it very dangerous. So I think they already had a rift over something. Him and Trump had a rift on air live over something. So Musk is an interesting guy. Yes, he's very charming. He's very nice. Could be. Do it anyways. So you're going to do it here, and we'll as much. Oh, I don't know about him. He's a weirdo. And I know if Captive Desk was here, I don't know that he's not here. He would tell you that he has a lot of very negative opinions about Musk's actual genius abilities. I think Musk's only real good thing is over the years, he has managed to hire people that made him money. He's been really good at that. So, but he probably learned that from his parents too. So it's like he's not the genius behind like SpaceX and all the things they're accomplishing or whatever. He leaves that thinking the hard sweat work is somebody else's job, not Musk's. So yes, it is. You're coming at the end of the stream, but I spent the entire stream debunking this stupid video that tried to justify slavery in the Bible and says it's not really slavery. It's more like indentured servitude and all that jazz. So, I mean, if you want a good breakdown of this, go back to the beginning of the stream and watch it. So, kind of in the afterglow of that and talking politics because, you know, we like to talk about dangerous shit. So, remember when they used to make the jokes about the founder of Facebook, how he looks like an alien? I think Musk actually fits that better. The way his skin sits on his face, it's far more like it's on something. So when Earl said he was a cyborg, I can buy that. Okay, and his skin is starting to get too rubbery to fit well. So like I can buy that. Yeah, he if he loses money, like if he lost a lot of money, he would lose that brand. But yeah, the stuff. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Okay. When you look at his face, does it not look like it's sitting on something wrong? Okay. Like there's something underneath that isn't human. Like it's not a real skeleton. It's like metal or something, and it just doesn't fit the fleshly skin. That's why I think your observation is so beautiful. It's just like, all right, okay, okay, all right, I get you. Yes, I've made that point. Is like there's if you look at who the anti-abortion rhetoric hurts the most, it's minorities. Okay, because they end and people that are poverty disadvantaged. Like I'm thinking back to my days in Texas with my kids in class, and there's with this anti-abortion law they have in Texas. I'm thinking, oh my God, what would happen to a lot of kids in my class? Because most of them are Hispanic. And then I'm thinking to myself, you already have the Catholic doctrine that having a lot of babies is a good thing. And then you throw in an anti-abortion man. How many of those girls that are Hispanic are going to end up having their second child before they even get out of high school? It's going to be a lot. So an interesting and applicable analogy. So yes, none of the panels fit. Oh my gosh, you guys are great tonight. Because I every time I see Elon, it's like, my God, what is wrong with his face? Yeah, it's like, every time. It's like, God damn it. What's wrong with this dude? So yeah. Yeah, it's just it's funny. Yes, he's a very strange looking human. Very strange looking. Cybertus. Okay, there we go. I don't know. I always thought that Arnold pulled off the cyborg better, you know, because of his physique back in the day. Like I always picture if you're going to do a cyborg, you got to give a metal skeleton, but then also give it plenty of room for the gizmos and stuff. And the best way to do that is make them a bodybuilder where you have lots of extra mass to put that shit in. So, uh, he'll be back. Oh, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, see, the thing is, the Deep South, you have country music and inbreeding. So, and that's not a joke either way, by the way. I remember when somebody in West Virginia objected to a T-shirt that said it's all relative in West Virginia. It's all relative, and somebody got mad about it, and then another guy who's a West Virginian said, "Yeah, but it's true." So, yeah, it's just a little scary down there. Hey, don't worry about it. If it wasn't for spell checker, John, I would have so many misspelled things. I do the same thing. I put, like, when I'm typing, I'll hit one letter before the other, and I've been through 12 keyboards and it's still the same. So truth hurts. Yeah, see, truth hurts. I think the T and the S were supposed to be. So Martin has the same problem. Yeah. 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 It's heavy metal. There you go. Yeah, he does look unhealthy. I think that's the point we're trying to make. Yeah, isn't it interesting that where religion thrives, that sort of behavior also exists because it has to. Especially when religious groups begin to get very, very small, they start to justify other ways to keep everything in the faith, and inbreeding seems to be one of them. Oh, he's doing Mars. Oh, is his body on Mars? Jesus. Jesus. Here's a conspiracy theory I can get behind, Paul. Thanks for that. Appreciate that. Musk bars. Don't give him any ideas. Uh, yeah, because it's all about keeping it in the family. West Virginia actually did have that problem. Actually, a lot of the Appalachia mid of the United States had that problem because of the lack of people. Like there's nobody, you know. So you keep it in the family, cousins marrying cousins, that sort of thing. So yes, he was. And I think I don't know if some of that might have stuck with him. That's what bothers me about him. I'm more bothered about Musk sometimes than I am Trump. So yeah, it didn't help. It definitely didn't help. Yep, they're some of the most religious still, you know, at the risk of being labeled Islamophobic. Yeah, there's a lot of Islamic nations that still have child marriage laws on the books. So just pointing that out. Of course, everybody knows what I feel about the whole phobic thing anyway. So if you don't, I think it's illegitimate stuff to call things phobic at every drop of the hat. So, yeah. I see. I have a question for you, Europeans, because you're trying to maintain all your distinct European cultures. Is that going to also lead to the same kind of behavior where you have where Dutch, like John's in the Netherlands? Do people from the Netherlands have to marry people from the Netherlands to maintain the culture too? I'm just wondering. It's a purely information seeking question. I mean, do you think that would happen? Yeah, the House of Windsor. Yeah, I know, but I remember when what's his face? Oh gosh, he was on Bill Maher's show. What the hell's the actor's name that played Batman? Said that shit. And I'm like, and then everybody who doesn't agree with him is Islamophobic, and I'm like, we literally had how many people just who are Islamic fly buildings into fly airplanes into buildings, and you want to say that that's not part of it? Oh my god. Yep. Yeah, it's Ben Affleck. That's right. But yeah, I mean, we're talking about enough people that would only fill a minor league ball stadium. I'm like, it only took how many to kill thousands of people with airplanes? If I put all of those people in that small stadium in airplanes and they're allowed to kill people, that's a pretty significant number of people. So, you know, Uh, yeah. Dad with a Russian, his cousin married an Ugandan, but Sweden is a very Creole country to begin with because we always had a population deficit. Okay. Yeah, because I noted that a lot of you European countries are advocating for immigrants, like you're paying people to immigrate there and setting them up, from Iceland all the way to Sweden and everything. It's like, is the labor shortage getting that bad? I mean, is the population deficit really getting that bad to that point? So yeah. By the way, Paul, more people than me thought what you said is funny. So yeah, it's definitely a difference. I always love that statement. Um, but I remember that conflict. That one became legendary because I was like, at the time, I was like, Ben, I think you're full of shit. Okay, I think Islam is a danger. I mean, because I was watching a video by Christopher Hitchens in it the other day, and he's like, you keep going on about the difference between a fundamentalist and a moderate, but doesn't the moderate support the fundamentalist by their inaction about it? So oh yeah, that's probably true. What is that? Okay. So Kirk is church, right? So, Calvinistic. Shit. So we're combining Calvinistic fatalism with staying in the faith. Holy shit, that's going to lead to some inbreeding. Holy fuck. So, daughter of the founder of the McChurch. Yeah, me and Earl are kind of, ooh. So, but yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of, because I yeah, exact, indeed. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, that's just a recipe for disaster for the people involved. The extreme fatalism of Calvinism, and then combine it with the idea of being, you got to stay true to your faith. Holy shit. Okay, you could justify just about anything with that. I mean, I know it already has. Uh, America is a good example of Calvinism run amok half the time. So, from manifest destiny to the pilgrims thinking, oh, look at all this land is empty. Yeah, because Europeans came and left a plague, and all the people that were here are dead. They didn't put down the parts where they'd walk through fields of just dead bodies. So, so yes, they are. They tried. There's some Amish around here in Michigan too. And the reason I know about this is the Amish in Michigan contacted the Amish in Pennsylvania, and they want to do a trade of people. And so it's looking like the Amish are heading in the direction of arranged marriages in order to overcome the problem. Because you literally have to, in many Amish communities, you would have to marry your first cousin to stay in the faith. So, yeah, it is. His upbringing is starting to show. So, yeah. I'm not sure it's slave trading, but it's definitely wife swapping. I mean, I don't know. They are having a problem because they're not. They also have the problem, and because they haven't got modernized farming techniques, that sometimes that leads to stupid decisions with agriculture. Um, so they have good stuff. A lot of people like them because they're quote unquote organic, but at the same time, they have an inbreeding problem because they're like, we got to trade with the Amish in Ohio or Pennsylvania. We got to send some of our youth there, and they got to send some of their youth our direction. But the problem is Amish communities can be very different as far as their things. So it's their doctrines and theology and the way they do things. And sometimes it's a culture shock for a lot of these kids, and they don't want to do it. Like some of them have that thing where you can leave the Amish community for a while and try things out in the world, and others don't. So yeah, they are from the same places in Europe too. You're right about that. A lot of these groups came out of that. Yep. They won't do that. They don't believe in artificial insemination, which is sad because I have 3 grandbabies, well, 2 of them and 1 on the way, that are the result of that, because my daughter-in-law can't get pregnant naturally. She has to have medical help. And so but they Amish don't believe in that modern stuff. It's a funny world here in Michigan with the Amish, because they won't let electricity into their home, but they have a power line running to their barn, and that's where all their cell phones are charging. It's just really weird. The technology that they accept and don't accept varies from family to family. And as Earl points out, it's like every one of these Amish families is like a mini cult in and of itself. And so the fact that they're talking to each other and realizing they have an inbreeding problem, which they're getting from their experience with livestock, and thinking about, arranged marriages with people outside the community to get rid of that. Yeah, they're at least acknowledging that there's a problem with it. So yeah, it does. Yes, there was a story about that I saw. It's really tough because when you consider the fact that if you're a girl and you decide to stay in the Amish, who your husband is probably not going to be really much your choice. Um, it's going to be the community that makes that decision for you. So, I mean, I guess it's like it's also the fact that you suppress sexual expression that much to the point of how you dress. And I'm going to tell you this: I think in Islamic states that have, the high, you got to wear the head to toe covering and all that shit. I'll bet that that's true there too. Okay, I will bet money, because when you suppress stuff like that, people always are drawn to it. So, yeah, be practical. It's like Jewish, but practical. I don't know. Yeah, they don't. Um, Around here, the Michigan Amish, they have cell phones hooked up to chargers in their barns, because the Bible says don't bring electricity into your home. So their homes are completely unplugged, but their barns and their agricultural facilities are electrified in some cases. So when you have this notion of that kind of thing. Also, I had a friend who used to get paid money to give Amish rides in his cars, because they're allowed to accept rides in the car. They're just not allowed to drive themselves or own one. So they could still have their carriages and their horse and buggies, and they do that. But everybody thinks it's cute and quaint and everything. But have you really looked at the Amish society? I don't think it's all that cute. So yeah, agreed. Repent of its ways. I don't know. Yes, I've heard that. I think in religiously, sexually oppressive societies, you're going to have sexual assault rates that are higher, because it's forbidden. We're not allowed to talk about sexual desire, so it never gets brought up and never gets talked about, and so people have to deal with it themselves, and they go overboard. No, they're not. They have this very real. People are the master species of the earth and everybody else can just suck it. And so they don't feel they have to be good to animals because animals aren't going to heaven and all that stuff. Only people are. So yes, this is the problem with taboos. It's the problem with making things illegal. People want, you make it more desirable, and either bad behavior or black market covers it. So human beings will do what human beings do. And you got to figure out a way to keep it safe for everybody instead of just saying, don't do it. Don't do it doesn't seem to work. I don't know about anybody else when I was growing up. When somebody told me not to do something, it always made it like, well, why? Why not? So there's that. Well, folks, wow, it's been 2.5 hours. I'm going to call it a night. I got some things that I got to do, and my evening off, so I want to do a little relaxing too. So, thanks for stopping by, everybody. For the people that donated today, thank you very much. I appreciate that. It always makes it much easier. Thanks, guys. It was a great chat tonight. The slavery part was great, but the chat about some of this other stuff was even great too. So it was great fun. Appreciate all of you. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate all of you. Like and share the video. Make sure you leave comments. If you think other comments could be made, do all that. Super chat, everything was great today. Thank you all for your donations. Appreciate you. And hopefully we'll meet a goal this week, and we'll be meeting again next Saturday because that's kind of my condition. So I'll see you all then. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate all of you. And live your last life. You only get one go around, and then it's over. So you need to make sure that you're spending all your time, money, and opportunities on yourself, the people you love and care for, and to make this a better world. You'll be happier if you do. And don't waste it on the trappings of religion and faith, because that is a dead end. I speak from experience. As always, folks, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.